What was really important for me was the professional help that I got, therapy. For the first time, read books that were forbidden for me to read was a very different narrative than the narrative that the Mormon Church told me. I was shocked. Hi, I'm Lyn Smith Gregory, the great-grandniece of Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormon Church. And welcome to Heretic Survivor, From Mormon to Me. Thanks so much for joining me. Today, I'd like to talk about something that I didn't understand was related to religious trauma, and that was my struggles with perfectionism. As you can imagine, it was quite a burden being related to Joseph Smith in my Mormon community in Salt Lake City. Everyone knew who we were, and we were held up as an example to follow. My parents and the church and my community expected me to be perfect, better than other people, hardworking, successful, the top of my class, really in the top of everything that I did because I was so blessed. It was a heavy burden, but it was normal for me. I thought this is how everyone lived. I felt like minor mistakes were moral failures. I wasn't devoted enough. I wasn't trying hard enough. I wasn't being devoted enough. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a sin. And it was proving that I wasn't worthy of my exalted legacy. So it created a shame spiral for me of not measuring up whenever I failed at something or didn't do as well as everyone seemed to expect me to do. Well, when everything changed when I was 19 years old and went away to university, and after being challenged by an atheist professor to defend my faith in his classroom, I did a lot of outside research on the Mormon Church and my famous forefather, and for the first time read books that were forbidden for me to read in the Mormon Church. And what I discovered was a very different narrative than the narrative that the Mormon Church told me about Joseph Smith, Samuel Smith, my great-great-grandfather, and the Mormon Church's early history. I was shocked and disbelieving at first. But these were books and articles written by scholars and historians who didn't have an axe to grind with the Mormon Church. They were just relaying history as was documented in newspapers, signed affidavits, eyewitness accounts, and it told me some shocking information about Joseph Smith and the early Mormon Church. I was shattered, and I left the Mormon Church after discovering that so much of what I believed was a lie, and that Joseph Smith himself was a really disreputable person, a con artist, a liar, a fraud, a womanizer, and a predator. But leaving the church wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. I even geographically left Salt Lake City, all of Utah, and for New York City, where I thought the anonymity would allow me to create myself from scratch, and I could discard my Mormon background and never tell anyone about it. But I found that I had internalized the messages that I received from the church, from my parents, about being perfect. about needing to be perfect in order to be worthy of belonging or love. And since I had internalized them, it was my voice telling me that I was a failure. It was my voice that I was afraid of hearing. It was my sense of self that made me feel ashamed. But that was because those messages were so early in my life, and without any critical thinking skills to defend myself, I believed them. And it wasn't so simple just to say, well, the Mormon Church, I don't believe in the Mormon Church, so I don't believe in needing to be perfect. It wasn't until my unhappiness led me into therapy that I connected the dots, that my perfectionism was a part of religious trauma. Perfectionism, let's talk about that. What is perfectionism? For me, it manifested in overthinking, in not trying new things because if I wasn't sure I was going to be successful at it. Procrastination, because I didn't want to start something knowing that I had to do it perfectly. So I would postpone it until the last minute. It was important for me to understand my perfectionism is in the context of religious trauma, because there were so many aspects to deconstruct. The need to take back my own autonomy after not utilizing it for most of my life growing up. Decisions for me were made by others, by a higher authority, a better authority, an authority that couldn't be challenged. It was God speaking. And deciding for myself what I believed and what was true for me took time. And one of the things I learned, that I had to be patient and compassionate with myself, that the journey had lots of ups where I thought I've turned the corner and I'm no longer experiencing residual effects, guilt based on my religious upbringing. And then something would happen, I would be triggered, and I would find that there was still more unpacking to do. I had to understand what I valued, what I thought being worthy meant. And when I looked at the people I admired and respected, it wasn't because they were perfect. It was because they were kind, or they were giving, or they were courageous or loyal. It wasn't about being perfect that made me want to be like them and to be around them. What was really important for me was the professional help that I got, therapy. And I highly recommend getting therapy if you struggle with perfectionism, because the roots may go deeper than you think, especially if you've left a high demand, high control religion like I did. Something else that was really important to me was to change the way I talked to myself. The loudest voice in my head was very critical. I had to make friends with the critic in my head and suggest a gentler, kinder voice. I used the example when I was trying to change the way I talked to myself. Would I say this to a friend? And if I wouldn't say it to a friend, then I decided I was not going to say it to myself. There's a quote from Brene Brown that I love, and I'll read it here. Perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is the belief that if we are perfect, look perfect, act perfect, we are immune or can avoid the path of shame, failure, judgment. Perfectionism is a shield, a 20-ton shield that we think can protect us, when in fact it's the very thing that really prevents us from taking flight. First of all, perfectionism is a myth. When I understood that the requirement to be perfect or live up to unrealistic standards of behavior, I realized that it was actually a control mechanism to make people feel unworthy and under the thumb of the leaders of the organization or cult. I've learned to embrace the beautiful, messy humanness of life itself. Humans aren't perfect. That's why they have the expression, we're only human. And embrace it rather than fight it. It's part of being alive. I changed my goals not to become the best at everything, not to look perfect or act perfect and never make a mistake, but to try to become my most authentic self. That became the goal rather than perfection. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is the opposite. What will they think? I'd love to hear about your journey, your story, or your struggle with perfectionism, or leading a high control religion. Please share in the comments and become part of this community. It helps not to feel like you're the only one out there having these thoughts and these experiences. Get support. On my website, I have a number of resources for trauma, religious-based trauma therapists, and support groups, books that I found that have been helpful, and other resources to utilize on your journey. I hope you found this video helpful. If you think someone else might find it helpful, please share. I would love to have you subscribe to my channel and follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and this channel. Please subscribe so you don't miss another episode of what it's like being Mormon royalty and leaving the church, and what I've discovered is helpful on my spiritual journey. And I'd love to hear about yours. Thanks for joining me. Bye.